So, yeah, so I work for ParkMobile, which I went to the city of Falcon Heights. They invited me to work through their issue with parking during the state fair. And I work for the largest mobile payments provider for parking programs in the country. It is part of a new corporation. Well, we just renamed it, but it's called ParkMobile. But it has constituent members or sub-corporations, companies in many cities around, or countries, sorry, around the world. So it's headquartered in Sweden, actually. So all the parking technology that's in Europe, we are starting to implement here in the United States. So oddly enough, Europe is maybe 10 years ahead of the US as far as like dealing with these urban development parking technology and policy decisions. So it's really good to have access to the type of stuff that they're doing. And I'll show you a little bit of that in a second. But with Falcon Heights, and I'll share my screen. If I can figure this out. Okay. So with Falcon Heights, we're doing a program that is temporary. So typically when we do a parking program, the program is permanent, right? So we install signs and the city brings us in and they charge for parking on street. They can also do it off street as well. And we do it, whatever rules the city sets up and however long that window is, but we don't remove them. In this case, we're just installing during the state fair. And we provide the signs for free. I'll show you what some of those look like. But the city basically has full control over their operational side. We're just the technology provider. So what is that technology? That is, in this case, a mobile app. So I brought my little phone here. I mean, I could have screen shared it and all this techno, whatever. But it's basically a little app on your phone. We've had it in Minneapolis. We've been powering the Park Minneapolis app. We currently don't do it in St. Paul. We just have the pay stations, those physical stations that you use. So we've been in the area for a long time, but some of you are probably already familiar, especially if you've parked on the Minneapolis side. You're already familiar with how our system works. So in this case, we are doing it, like I said, temporarily in the city of Falcon Heights for the 12 days of the fair. So I put a little summary of what that program looks like up here on the board. So it's going to be on the public streets, including residential streets in that case. They are tweaking their program. And so since we signed the contract, I want to say in June, they may have changed some of this. So don't quote me on it, but I believe at this time they have one zone number. So you know how in St. Paul or Minneapolis, you have different zone numbers, or if you have the same zone number, there's a space number that's attached to it, like in St. Paul. They're not doing that. I think they have one zone number for the entire program. The signage will be on posts that they install with additional A-frames, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. But they're installing those posts and then they're removing them after the fair. And their public works department is doing that. Now, of course, none of that has anything to do with us. I'm just explaining what they said their program is going to be. Maybe they've changed some of these details, right? Now, as far as the parking policy, what's really cool is that the way the technology works is the city can set all the rules that they want and the policies that they want. So if they want to have it where there's no parking after 5, you couldn't complete a transaction after 5 on the program, for example. They're able to set that. They can set the rates themselves, all of that kind of stuff. So they have total flexibility operationally using our product. In Falcon Heights, they're using a flat rate. So I believe it is $25 for the parking session. But you can also use variable rates. You can change how much it costs at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday versus 5 p.m. You can do all kinds of stuff, right? So, but they're keeping it as a flat rate. Enforcement, there are 2 options. So you can integrate with the citation management software. So they're using the St. Anthony Police to write the citations. we do have an ability to integrate with those types of ticket writing softwares. I don't believe that's what we're doing in this case, because what they're going to do is they're going to have what are called parking ambassadors that are directly employed by the city of Falcon Heights, that are going to be out on the street, directing people and informing them as to what's happening, but also using our Enforce, which is basically on a phone like this, it'll pull up the license plates that have been paid, and then they'll look at it. Basically turns the license plate into a hang tag, sort of. The equivalent of that. So they'll be like, okay, that plate is paid for. They won't flag the St. Anthony police officer to write a citation, they'll just move on. So that's how they're gonna do enforcement, but there are more options than what they're currently doing. So maybe that'll be revisited in the future as they get through this first year of the program. The revenue is distributed to the city monthly because we're the merchant of record. So we process the transactions and then give them a deposit each month. So any questions so far? I've gone through like the high level, and I know it was a spicy topic because I actually got somebody who saw, because my name is on the contract and my phone number is, so, and they put that on the internet. And I actually got a president call me. I was like, cool, because I like talking about this stuff. So actually, no, I don't like talking about this stuff at all. Do not talk. But I talked to him to chat about how this is all going and whatnot. That's actually the first time that this has happened. And I've been working here for 2.5 years. And so they're I kind of like it. They're very active in Falcon Heights. So I appreciate that. So anyway, these are examples of the signage, and if you have any questions, just raise your hand. I'm willing to stop at any time. 18 by 24 inch signs, I believe those are the ones that they're going to post on these posts that they're installing, and then those 24 by 36 A-frames right here, they're going to post some of those as supplemental signage. So they want to make sure that people know this is a paid zone. This is what it looks like. This is how you do the payment. So like I said, there's a zone number right there. That's what you use to do the transaction. And that's essentially how it's going down. This is kind of our typical, you can do it mobile pay only, which is what it is in this case. So there's no pay stations over there. It's just mobile pay only. We do that in cities year round also. So I just threw this slide in here to show that it's like a normal thing to do, not just for the fair, but also like the city of Knoxville, Tennessee, for example, pulled out all of their meters. That's an example that used to have a meter head on it. They'll pull it out and then just put those signs on full time. So this is a really low cost way of facilitating a paid parking program. And so, like I said, we provide the signage at no cost, and we don't charge an upfront fee or subscription fee for the actual mobile payment technology. So the city doesn't have to make an upfront investment as far as our service goes.
So you need the app. You need to download the app. I think a lot of people are going to be caught by surprise.
No, you don't have to download.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
No, you're ahead. You got ahead. No, it's good. That's why I'm like, ask questions.
That would be my first thing. Oh, no, I have to.
No, you don't have to download the app.
Do I use the app? Oh, I need to enter my credit card.
You do have to use a card or a card equivalent. There are options, flexibilities around that. But you don't have to download the app. So you can just go on the website and you don't have to download anything. You don't have to sign up for an account. It's very fast. So
I'm sorry to get ahead of you.
there are that's fine. You don't want to see your little district. So that's fine. That's fine. You're like, I'm about business. Okay, so that's right here. There's 3 main ways to pay. So you can pay by the app, that's downloading it. You can pay by the web, which is very similar to paying by text. Because we'll have a text number on there. You text that number, it sends you a secure link so that the spiciness that happened in this meeting in terms of hijacking, that won't happen if you have a text option versus a QR code, for example. So it makes it secure. You get the link that way, and then it takes you to the website. You don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to sign in and you can just go straight to the checkout. So that's that last slide there, the guest checkout. That's what that looks like. So you don't even have to sign up. You can just be like, oh, I want to go as a guest, or you can use, you can create an account if you want. But it's really fast, really intuitive, and makes it really easy to use. Because for us, and for parking programs generally, you don't want enforcement actions, you want compliance. So you want to make it very easy for someone to comply with your rules in your program, to be able to get in and get out, because who wants to fumble around with parking? You're not there to park, you're there to go to whatever amenity that you want to use or what have you. So we're trying to make that process as fast and seamless as possible. So,
What about the folks who have the Minneapolis parking app already? Can they got the same one? Or
So-
another city, I think Park Chicago is another one.
Yeah, that's a different one, but
Oh, okay.
because, well. So it's actually really complicated. You bring this up. It is the same app,
It is.
but we are two different internal companies because ParkMobile used to power Minneapolis parking directly. But then it was Flowbird, but then we bought Flowbird. And so it's the same app again, but it's not integrated into this. It will be in some time in like a year.
So for the time being.
For the time being, it
just going to
won't-
the Minneapolis parking. app.
It won't work. It would have like
Yeah, if you
9
had
or
done
18 months ago,
yeah.
but not now. But it will in the future. What were we talking about? We were talking about parking apps, look at easy. When I was showing you this map. Oh, yeah. Okay. So the reason why I'm pulling this map up, you all know this area better than I do, but you know the state fair is up in that upper left corner, that's where Falcon Heights is, right? And then it's gonna come up to Hoyt, and that's why they'll have ambassadors out that will be directing people like, hey, you've entered the paid zone, this is Falcon Heights, whatever. And those signs will be up, so it'll be clearly marked. I know that there's a jurisdictional boundary there and that there's not gonna be a program, at least in this upcoming year. But there's the option that the city would have to be able to, and they're interested, we're gonna have a presentation, like a little mini conference after this happens, to present it to St. Paul, Roseville, we're inviting the different district committees and the transportation committee, for example, to talk about how this worked this first year and see what interest is in doing this kind of a program elsewhere. Because as you all know, the politics of this, where the local community bears the cost of facilitating parking and the increased volume of people in the area during the fair, but the compensation isn't there. And so whether you go to the fair or not, you're paying for those porta potties, for the extra, whatever. And that's tough. So this is one way that you can begin to attach revenue to that cost. So to make it fiscally more viable. And it's progressive also, in the sense of when you have motor transportation that is unpaid for by the user, then it's a regressive cost on people who walk, bike, take busing, whatever, because they're still having to pay for that individual motor transportation and not using it, right? So, and there's more of the politics of how that works and why. And, there's a 600-page book, if you're really interested, called "The High Cost of Free Parking" by this guy named Donald Shoup, who, RIP, he just died 3-4 months ago. But he's kind of the guru, the godfather of parking theory in the United States. So anyway, with that being said, we're really excited about this program. And I think the one thing that I want to press upon you, and if you have any more questions about the state fair thing, that's great. I can answer that. But one last piece that I want to show you is that, and I'll skip, hey, we're the biggest network. These are all the cities we have, blah, blah, blah. Ooh, look at that. 65 million. Actually, it's 75 million now. This slide is old. here's what it looks like in the region, 2.6 million regional users. This is all important because people are going to be very familiar with ParkMobile when they come to the fair. And if you have visitors, they're going to most likely be from one of these cities that's already familiar with how it works. I showed you what the app does. We had a little conversation about that. Here's why I'm interested in talking to you. It's not just about the fair, although that's a big deal. What I'm interested in beyond that is that we don't just provide parking transaction payment services. We also produce data for cities. So there's a program that we're in the process of rolling it out in Minneapolis called Insights. So essentially we are going to map the entire city of Minneapolis. So all of their streets, we'll have every single parking space mapped. We'll have all the trees on a block face mapped. We'll have all of the parking rules and the pictures of all the signs, all of that mapped. And then we're going to, we have a car that's like a Google car that goes out. Actually, I'll show you what it looks like. I'll skip ahead a bit. It looks like that. This is an old version of it, but it looks kind of like that. It goes out, does all that mapping. Then we provide these scanners to the car, which they put on their fleet vehicles, which will tell them all the occupancy. So on a Tuesday at 5 p.m., how many cars are typically parked on this block in the city? And why that's important is that you can begin to use that data to make policy changes. So you can run simulations. You can be like, all right, if we turn this street into a no parking street, what does that do to the streets around it? And you can run simulations through our software. We can also map every pothole in the city. So that's what that is. That's what it looks like, right? So Public Works, for example, can use this data to plan how they do their street repairs and have a consolidated area or consolidated map that shows what that looks like, for example. So the reason why I bring that up is because Minneapolis. Well, actually, yeah, let's start with Minneapolis. Minneapolis has a centralized system. They have a parking department that's within the public works system. Everybody, all of the decision making is very clear. There's a clear chain of command where it's housed, bureaucratic. St. Paul has a decentralized system, which the police do the enforcement, the traffic engineers do the meter repairs, which when I say meters, I mean the pay stations, those little things. There's just whole different departments doing different pieces of the program, right? That's not necessarily bad. So I wanted to give you an example of how, not just with the parking program, but if St. Paul brings us in as a partner on the mobile pay side, we'll give them this Insights program for free. And what that would enable is for you to do things like this. This is the city of Portland. So the city of Portland, the district councils like you all have, those district councils have parking programs that are specific to each of them. So if you all want to charge for parking during the fair and on some street that's particularly busy or whatever, they get the money attached to that reinvested back into their district. So this is what that looks like. Now, beyond that, these districts also are able to have access. If we had Insights, for example, they would have access to that data to go to their city partners and be like, hey, we have this problem on this street, and here's what the data says. Let's come up with the solution here. So it would empower you all to begin to have conversations with the city in a totally different way that has that kind of the pothole data, the number of trees on a given block, all of this stuff. You all could actually be able to be like, hey, show us the insights we want to see. You could have a different kind of conversation. So anyway, just to give you an example of what it's like in Portland, each district has a different parking program. This is just straight from their website, by the way. I didn't even make this. I just cut and pasted it, right? But it's kind of like how Falcon Heights is doing it, right? And I know Falcon Heights is its own municipality, but you could take this principle and apply it to at the district level here since it's decentralized, right? So here's what they've been able to do as far as reinvestments back into the community using a paid parking program. Now theirs is year round, but in Falcon Heights, just on the state fair, that 12 days, they're anticipating over $200,000 in revenue. So that they'll be able to reinvest in their community. So this is a big deal. I think people overlook the parking question. I didn't know anything about it until I worked in urban development for a small city in Georgia. And then within like 3 months, I was like, oh my God, parking is like the key to developments in urban contexts. Like it's extremely important. And so I got really passionate about it. And now I'm here talking to you. So, I think this is all really exciting stuff. I'm thankful for your all's interest. I hope that wasn't too painful. I skipped around a bit to try to make it less annoying. But if you all have any questions, please let me know. Yes.
You mentioned, so there's a camera you can put on a car and it goes around and maps potholes or trees or whatever.
Yeah,
So
and
then if you want up-to-date data, you have to have this car going around pretty frequently.
no, so what it does is it's algorithmic. So it takes about 3 months to gather the data. It has to go around the streets a number of times in that 3 months, right? And then it's using algorithmic data to complete the occupancy number, like essentially percentage. So it's not a one-to-one, it's not in real time. So but it is useful because it's giving you the typical Wednesday at 5 p.m. And it does update because it doesn't stop at that 3 months. It keeps gathering and it'll keep refining the data. But it would help because you, like in your case, you'd be like, all right, this is what we typically have. And then the state fair is worse than this typical situation, right? In say district or sub-district, whatever, what are they called? Sub-districts? Okay, sub-district 1, you could be like, all right, this is our typical usage pattern. And it's worse than that when the fair happens. We should do this. We're gonna lose this many spaces, or our occupancy on the block is already 70% or whatever it is, right? You would have that number. And then you'd be like, all right, during the fair, it's gonna be even worse, and we really have to do something about it. So it just changes the way you're able to have these conversations. Yeah.
I used to live over there, and when the fair was going on, you'd get like a pass from a car to park on the street. So I'm assuming that's not an option anymore, or like.
So in Falcon Heights, the way they did it is they have resident passes that they have distributed. And so those and we could have done it where it was digital, but they decided to do physical passes, which it's way more expensive, but whatever. And so I don't care. What I care about is like being able to create the program. But ideally, you would want it to be digital because then it would be attached to a specific license plate. But in this case, they can rotate them and whatever. So not the initial ones. That's how they decided to do it. So, but that speaks to how flexible the system is. However you want to set it up, you can do it efficiently. You could do it like for whatever political carve-outs you need to have, whatever. The city can determine that. All we are is providing the means for being able to post the signs, collect the payments. That's it. And we give you the means of being able to know whether the car is paid for or not. But if you want to write citations, you've got to do that. And if you want to have physical passes, you can do that too.
I think you probably said this, but how does ParkMobile pay? Like what does
so we have a transaction fee that goes per transaction. So like I said, there's no upfront cost. So we negotiate that transaction fee and then we get a percentage of the revenue. I forget what it is in Falcon Heights. I don't want to tell you the wrong number. It's in their presentation. Whatever it actually is. I can't remember at the moment. But it's a percentage in that case. With a year-round program, we typically do 45 cents per transaction. That's what it is typically. But that's because in a year-round program, it's an hourly charge, not a flat fee for all day. So we are not doing our typical program. We're doing a percentage in this case. So which I can't quite recall which percentage it is.
So theoretically, if the city was using you downtown year round, that could affect the negotiation in a way for when they meet for a season thing like this as well. I really like the part you talk about, the money generated, a portion of it getting invested back into the community. I think that's really important. And not something the city is already doing with some of their parking structures. This is I used to do community work downtown where the city owns multiple parking ramps that generate revenue as well as obviously having the meters. And this was a conversation I was wanting to have while I was doing that work, but COVID is happening. So the parking ramps were empty and it wasn't really a discussion that the city folks were interested in having because they were too busy wondering how they were going to pay for things that the parking used to pay for. So having me ask them that question at the time would have been poor time. But I think downtown should be advocating for some of that downtown parking money getting spent in downtown. And I think if we do this, if the city decided to go forward with something like this here, we would want to start that at the ground floor, hopefully through the Ward 4 office. Asking what's in it for Como and how will it offset some of the public safety concerns that happened during the fair also.
I can think of two things. I've lived in sub-district one, so right near the fairground. One thing is some people, when they're looking for spots, those are kind of like parking sharks, they're wandering around trying to find an open spot. I don't know if this alleviates that at all.
It does in a certain sense, because, I mean, how can I put it? It might make it worse for you, actually, because you're not charging. So when people are circling around trying to hunt for spots, they're trying to find the cheapest thing, right? So if you're charging for parking, then that's designed to make it remove that process, right? So because there's no bargain hunting in that case, right? So that's actually in the Donald Shoup book, is the environmental implications of how much people are cruising around looking for spots, and that charging for parking helps to alleviate that.
The other aspect is very similar to that, and that is lots of people on their own yards, park cars. I don't know if that's true in Falcon Heights.
It's not.
Certainly in St. Paul.
Yes. So what would be different there is, and we were talking about this earlier, but if they wanted to have a status quo program and people wanted to park cars on their yards, they would still be able to do that. And on the side of the street where there is street parking allowed, then the city would be charging for parking on that side of the street. And that would essentially be a status quo kind of a thing that wouldn't just change anything. So other than charging for parking on the street, right? But cars could already park there, so it's not meaningfully changing the usage of the lane. But that's kind of similar to the carve outs for the passes in Falcon Heights, for example. So it's, super, super flexible. And when I said it would make it worse, I mean, those bargain hunters are going to come to your area because it's free, other than the lawn parking, right? So it is to your benefit, it's in your interest to hop on this program next year and really push the city to enable that, because I mean, who knows though? Maybe bargain hunters won't cross the street. I don't know, but that's definitely a factor in how this could go. And we've reached out to the fair too, to try to get, because ideally you would want everyone to be on the same system to be able to do a payment in a given geographic zone. So if you're parking on the fairgrounds, you could use it. If you're parking in Falcon Heights, you could use it. If you're parking in certain areas in Roseville, you could use it, or in St. Paul, your areas, right? And have it all be integrated. And you could integrate off-street assets that way too. So, because we could have them on a map that could show, okay, here's off-street options as well, whatever. So, the advantage of the digital approach is it really allows you to be super flexible, and it keeps people from having cash, as far as safety things go, keep having cash out and all of this. It eliminates that. So yeah, it's a good option.
and maybe I missed this before, but like, has the city of St. Paul expressed interest in this, or are they sort of just waiting to see how it, like, have they talked with you guys, you know, kind of how much is this? I guess, are you coming to the district council to have us sort of be a proponent of something like this to the city of St. Paul, or are there connections within the city of St. Paul that are already kind of have an ear to the ground?
Yeah, so as you can tell, I'm a bit of a go-getter. So I have in fact had multiple conversations with the city of St. Paul, and they have expressed interest. They're really excited to see what happens in the Falcon Heights situation specifically. And given that they already have pay stations and mobile pay, they're interested in the implications for Falcon Heights, not just related to the fair, but also with expanding with mobile pay only zones potentially in different areas, so they wouldn't do pay stations in some of those places. So we've had lots of conversations with them, and so that's prong one. Number two is, yes, part of why I'm interested in talking to you all is trying to make it clear, especially given the way that the governance is structured in St. Paul, where it's decentralized. There's not like a parking director that, you know, that can really hold all of this in their heads, right? So the role that you all have, and I already went to the transportation committee and did a similar presentation to them in June, which I think is how I'm here, right?
Yeah, so for context, there's an inter-district council transportation committee that meets during the weekday, during the work week, I think quarterly now. And I have mentioned it to the folks that are technically on our land use committee. If anybody's interested in getting the scoop on that invite, let me know and I'll share it. I would love it if there was a D10 representative on that meeting more often than I'm able to make it. But additionally, Rob is here because I reached out to him and invited him here. He obviously consented to coming, but I did that because I do think that the city of St. Paul, although they don't have an official stance on them doing this, I think they are watching this happen. So I'm trying to be proactive so that a year from now, 3 years from now, if the city decides to pull the trigger on that, we have a recording of this presentation and we can be somewhat familiar as informed residents of what's happened.
And I think secondarily, the reason why I put up the insights for you also is that if the city does that, then the conversations that you're able to have around how many trees we have, what are the potholes, I mean, there's all this data that you would benefit from if the city just generally, not even related to the fair and putting any kind of paid parking in your area, but just adding us alongside the options that they already have, then we give them this insights thing, and that would directly impact you all because you could have access to that data and begin to, as you're trying to explore all kinds of issues in your area, I think it would give you the ability to talk about it differently. So I think the ask there is, mention it to them, pass a resolution that says, hey, we would like insights or, whatever, to like put this on their radar more around like, hey, this is a thing that I think matters, that could really enhance our decision-making and creating essentially a common shared reality to have discussions around the transportation and just the streetscape more generally. Because I think that's probably one of the hardest things is because parking tends to elicit really passionate feelings, right? But how do we create a common shared reality basis to discuss those feelings and discuss policy implications? So I think that is, equally as big a takeaway that I want to press upon you as the state fair element, because I think it's not contingent on you charging for parking during the state fair to have access to all this stuff. So I just and that would be, so if you wanted to ask for both of them, that's great. But I think the city would love to hear more. That was my impression at the last meeting I had with them, which was also June, was that they need to hear more from people in the community as far as like where they're at with this technology, with this, with their interest in this kind of a program. So.
Thank you.
I can speak a little bit to that on behalf of the Ward 4 office. That's where I work at City Council, and so we're definitely really interested in this and super excited to see what happens in Falcon Heights this year. And having community support is such a big piece of being able to come to the table with any kind of policy to say that like the community is supporting this. Because obviously from a revenue standpoint, like that is a great option for the city. But it will matter to have the community back. And so I think it's great that you're here, and I'll give you my credit before you leave.
Awesome.
I think our office will be the one to bring it forward.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, one last thing. So just for people to one other takeaway is, if you want a change in how the parking operates, like, it's really important to think about it from the point of view of governing something, not simply making a demand, but like, what would it be like if I actually had to be responsible for implementing this, right? So the hardest part about parking is the city incurs the labor costs and the material costs and all of that for enforcing areas that have no revenue attached to them. And so when you're trying to, you only have so many resources as the decision makers that are coordinating routes and all of that. So if you have like permit only, or whatever in some zone, how often that enforcement vehicle is able to go out there and all of that, like, that's a cost that has no revenue attached to it oftentimes. Now, sometimes they charge for permits and whatnot, but once you introduce paid parking elements, even in addition to a permit zone, for example, then there's a revenue incentive to bring that enforcement, to bring that attention into that zone. So it helps make it sustainable. So, so that I think is also something to keep in mind, as especially like at the grassroots level, that these things like work in tandem to get more of the service that you want. This creates a real like revenue incentive attached to it. And the point isn't the revenue per se. You're also trying to modify behaviors. And so the pricing is a tool for behavioral modification. It's not, and the revenue is a byproduct of that. So if you want less congestion in this area, then the pricing is the tool for facilitating that. And so that's also in that high cost of free parking. Looks at 600 pages of just that, if you're really passionate. So, but at any rate, that's my spiel.
Well, Rob, thank you so much for taking some time and bearing with us through our technical difficulties today, to be able to come and talk with us about this. I think that you have a captive audience that is paying attention to see how this goes, both here, and it sounds like maybe at the city of St. Paul. I think the thing I can tell you is just that seasonally, state fair related congestion and parking and kind of like quality of life issues related to the folks who live in that high traffic neighborhood is just like, it's a constant for us. It is the water in which we swim. And so I think that we are really excited to just see some other ideas about how to maintain some of that quality of life, and in a way that I think acknowledges the cost that the community pays and finds a way to sort of like pay that back a little bit. So thank you so much. We appreciate it.